Good morning, everybody. I don't know, when I ask for everybody to sit down, they don't sit down as quickly, so Kimberly definitely has some sort of a magic touch over there. So good morning. It's great to see everybody here in person. Welcome to Anchin's 16th annual State of the Construction Industry event. We are incredibly excited to see so many of you in person. You know, it's really nice to see everybody in person and not be looking at a screen and seeing tiny little pictures and everything, so it's great to see everybody and be able to see so many of our colleagues and partners face to face. We also welcome those of you who are joining us virtually. I am Phillip Ross, partner and practice leader of Anchin's Architecture and Engineering and Construction Industry Groups. We're also pleased to present this event in cooperation with the New York Building Congress, the American Council of Engineering Companies of New York, and the Subcontractors Trade Association. Today you'll hear about current and future insights and important trends in the New York area's construction and design, including the topic that's on everyone's mind, infrastructure in the country and the city's return to prosperity and building activity. I have to say, we had no involvement to get the bill signed yesterday because our event was today. But it is good because in talking with all of you and talking with other people in the industry, everybody was saying when it gets passed, if it gets passed, so it's finally good to see that it was passed. Hopefully it has a great effect for the city and for the country. And I think the other benefit was we heard about so many tax law changes and tax increases, and this came about in the final situation that there doesn't have tax increases, so it's not as if they're giving business out to the construction and design industries and taking it back with extra taxes, so that's good to see. As everyone is more than aware, the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic were keenly felt by New York's construction and design industries. But today, we can say that the city is on its way to exceeding the optimism that was felt before February 2020. Much of that, I believe, is due to ways our economy and industry have evolved rapidly to embrace more resilient ways of working and more diversified projects. Construction is nothing short of the foundation on which our prosperity is built. And the firms here today are great examples of that effort. I look forward to hearing from our great panel and their perspectives and insights. This past year has seen more sectors thrive, leading to a more robust pipeline of work. Industrial, manufacturing, and logistics projects continue to meet the growing and shifting consumer demands that are changing the economy for the long term. Life sciences projects are creating space for new types of biomedical innovators in our city, while the office market is embracing ambitious visions of sustainability and automation that will ensure the world's most influential firms continue to have significant footprints here. Residential construction remains a focus, but the need for affordable and middle-income housing is diversifying the way construction firms are delivering multifamily work. The construction industry, in turn, is becoming more sophisticated through the rapidly growing fields of building technology and big data, which inform smarter, safer, and more efficient project delivery. And these projects are transforming skylines as well as building new opportunities in our neighborhoods. Nowhere is this more immediately apparent than in our public projects and infrastructure. The recent passage of the infrastructure bill is creating much needed enthusiasm for what New York's built environment can look like and deliver for people over the next decade, whether it's new tunnels under the Hudson, a revamped BQE, an updated subway system, or better flooding resilience throughout the city. Infrastructure is a major driver for industry excitement right now. Zooming back out, the Building Congress expects more than $60 billion in development projects and 135,000 new jobs in the industry by the time 2021 is over. I don't think when this started back in March of 2020, we could have expected that. We're even more bullish about 2022. And design and construction firms will continue to be leading innovators that drive the metro economy. On that note, I'm excited to introduce our panelists, who together with all of you will help to lead that drive. For our panel, we have Greg Kelly, President and CEO of the SDV Group, Julia Murphy, the Managing Principal and USA and Canada East Practice Leader for SOM, and Elizabeth Velez, the President of the Velez Organization and Chairperson at the New York Building Congress. Moderating our panel will be Johnny Evers, President and CEO of AEC New York. Not here today is Tom Foley, the Acting Commissioner of New York City DDC. Unfortunately, Tom was at an event over the weekend where someone tested positive, so he's taking precautions. We hope everybody at that event as well, and we see Tom soon. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Elizabeth Arnaiz, Executive Vice President of the Capital Program at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. A big thank you is in order to Liz for taking over for Rachel Loeb, who had a family matter to tend to. We send our best out to Rachel and her family. Elizabeth?
All right. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Thank you, Phil, for the introduction. And as Phil mentioned, sorry, let me arrange this. I'm Elizabeth Arnaiz. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Capital Division at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. You know, it's hard looking around this room to imagine that a year ago we couldn't do this. We couldn't do this in person. But now I'm so thrilled, obviously, that we're seeing New York City coming back. We see it coming back and reopening for business. We see it in Broadway. We see it in the kids back in school. We see it in concerts, sporting events. And we see it in the tech and in the life sciences. Their companies are cementing their commitment to New York City, from Google to TikTok to Regen Lab. It's time to reimagine our future and jumpstart our economy. If I've learned anything over the past year, it's that we cannot have good economic health without public health. And in the last few weeks, it has really punctuated that we can't have good economic health without good climate health. Understanding this equation and meeting these issues straight on will be critical to New York City's comeback. I truly believe that these will be the principles to guide us towards a more equitable and inclusive economic recovery for all. And I'm proud that EDC is a leader in the post-pandemic recovery for New York City. As head of the Capital Department, I lead a multidisciplinary team. It's composed of engineers, architects, planners, and landscape architects tasked to deliver on a diverse portfolio of over 100 projects, representing nearly $6 billion in construction over the next 4 years. For those of you who may not be familiar with the EDC, we work on behalf of the city to drive and to shape the economic development across the 5 boroughs. We use city resources to build partnerships between agencies, private businesses, and local communities. We strengthen neighborhoods and create good jobs through industry and business development initiatives, training and skill building, along with public investment in key infrastructure. We are 500 dedicated public servants who do this in 3 distinct ways. First, on behalf of the city, we serve as its key asset manager. We oversee and are the stewards of 66 million square feet of public real estate, which we're constantly investing in and upgrading to maximize our economic impact. This includes the ground leases at the Manhattan and Brooklyn cruise terminals, the wholesale food markets throughout the city, as well as a good portion of the Times Square Theater District. And we are the agency who renegotiated the extension of the lease at JFK Airport in February, which helped keep JetBlue's headquarters here in the city and unlocked the redevelopment of the terminals. Second, we not only manage these assets, but we build and we invest in these neighborhood infrastructures to ensure communities remain affordable, resilient, and sustainable as we work to address the real effects of public health and climate health. Today, and with some of you here, I believe, we're leading the study on Lower Manhattan's coastal resiliency with the mayor's office to fight the effects of climate change and prevent historic flooding like what we've seen recently. EDC also manages and oversees the design and construction of various projects across the city, creating hundreds of construction job opportunities, including the new Ruth Bader Ginsburg Hospital, located in South Brooklyn, which is an $800 million state-of-the-art facility which will improve access to the public health services. The Made in New York campus at the Sunset Park waterfront, which will provide manufacturers with affordable, best-in-class industrial facilities for garment making, as well as new film and television studio hubs. And we partner with the private sector to deliver affordable housing for our city's most vulnerable families. We see this in our Bronx Point development, a project located in the lower concourse of the South Bronx, which will deliver 540 affordable homes to New Yorkers. And it'll also house the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Finally, EDC invests in growing whole industries to make our economic diverse and resilient, a critical goal to keep the city competitive, capable of weathering a future crisis, and to draw and retain talent. Whole sectors, such as the life sciences, will set the city on a path to become a biotech and public health capital, where vaccines, treatments, and cures are born and technology advances. Investment in this industry supports the creation of jobs, not just in science, but also in construction, as we build new lab facilities and public health labs to ensure future pandemic preparedness. And most recently, I am proud that the mayor has doubled the city's investment from $500 million to $1 billion to expand the life sciences sector. We expect this investment to generate maybe 40,000 jobs in the life sciences ecosystem by 2026, excuse me. But of course, the elephant in the room today is what we have all lived through during this pandemic and how it continues to impact our lives. Thankfully, early investments helped the city through these moments, and EDC was able to rise to the challenges presented to the city of New York. Very early on, we partnered with local businesses to make millions of PPE gowns and face shields for healthcare workers at a time when they were almost impossible to come by. We set up supply chains, found experts and partners to manufacture newly designed bridge ventilators for hospitals. And at the height of the pandemic, EDC, along with the Department of Health, helped launch the Pandemic Response Lab, and subsequently the Pandemic Response Institute, both of which have allowed the city to reopen safely and provide easy access to testing. And most critically, these initiatives became a model for other cities looking to implement similar solutions. At the same time, we were keenly aware that kickstarting the economy meant keeping our construction projects moving and identifying key shovel-ready jobs to move forward. All of us here know that construction is a proven economic multiplier. Statistically, for each $1 million spent on construction, a total of 8 jobs is created in New York City. And with construction and real estate making up 20% of the city's GDP, while providing 10% of the jobs and 5% of wages, it was mission critical to ensure that there was a pipeline of projects and jobs for the future. I worked with many of you in those early months to advise the city on how to safely reopen the industry, specifically the construction sites. I thank you. Not done, but thank you. We knew if we did it right, these jobs would be a gateway to the middle class and create opportunities for small, minority, disadvantaged, veteran, and women-owned businesses to thrive. Now, as we move forward, protecting our city against the effects of climate change and getting ahead of the industry is critical for our future. I believe that implementing a green recovery will improve the lives of New Yorkers, safeguard our vulnerable communities, and create jobs of the future. We are currently exploring PropTech so that we can use it to test and scale innovative clean technology systems to benefit city assets and help them comply. PropTech is often misunderstood as an initiative that easily and only benefits high-end luxury buildings, but we're looking to change that. We want to build a market where all buildings, especially public buildings, can be more energy efficient, and expanding PropTech can do just that. Last year, EDC released an RFP seeking partners who could listen to the needs of the city, engage with the PropTech startups, and provide recommendations for technologies and innovations to pilot on our city assets. This partnership will ensure that we're making the exchange between what startups need and what the city needs truly work. And over time, we imagine that technology will help pilot and advance beyond the planning and development stage to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, help with construction management, and even innovate on emergency response techniques. And when we talk about green economy, we're really talking about the reliance on renewable energy and the jobs of the future coming together. In September, the EDC announced our vision to make New York City a hub for offshore wind development, an industry that will bring all levels of jobs to New Yorkers and offer our neighborhoods clean alternative energy. Not only is this industry critical for the future of providing renewable energy for the city, but we have the opportunity to build an industry from the ground up and make sure that all New Yorkers can benefit and participate. So how do we do that? EDC oversees the offshore wind efforts at the Sunset Park Marine Terminal in Brooklyn, an asset that we manage. This allows us to start early before the operations begin, to embed equity into all partnership agreements, to train and hire locally, and most important, to introduce this new industry and construction required for it to a diverse workforce. We see this as a significant opportunity to increase diversity in the construction workforce and support the MWBE firms in the world of green jobs. To do this, EDC is working now to build capacity, training individuals and growing expertise with minority and women-owned offshore construction companies. The goal is to support them now so that they are competitive and ready to compete for city contracts in the future. And this is just one example, as we work to reform the industry to make it easier, more equitable, and more efficient. EDC is proud of the work that we do with MWBE firms. Our robust program in 2021 alone made payments of $176 million to these firms, with an award rate of 40.9%. This makes us, EDC, one of the highest achieving agencies in the city. We're proud of this accomplishments, especially considering the slowdown in the construction industry as a result of the pandemic. But we're not getting complacent. We're working hard to address inequity as we see growing evidence that MWBE firms are that MWBE programs disproportionately benefit firms that are owned and operated by non-minority women, and therefore do not generate as many opportunities for firms certified as Asian, Black, and Hispanic owned. After further analyzing this trend, we are fully committed to address the inequities to counteract this documented disparity within the disparity. I'm proud that we are doing this by continuing to hold ourselves accountable and working to establish a comprehensive disparity study that will allow us to set disaggregated goals. By doing this, we aim to be a model for both public and private entities doing construction in the city, setting the bar high as I challenge each and every one of you to do the same. Lastly, we see opportunities for job growth and economic recovery through investments in sustainable infrastructure. And as one example, by moving commerce off the roads and onto water and railways. We are working on roadway and rail improvements, while long-term we're looking to leverage public-private partnerships to develop a marine highway barge landing across the city's waterways, among other plans to increase our maritime traffic. With the city's $100 million commitment to our Freight NYC initiative, the city's over-reliance on long-haul trucking will decrease. New York became a global capital of commerce because of our waterways. The water can once again be our future, but we need to build the right access. By reinvesting in this vital asset and moving more freight by barge, we're creating 21st century maritime jobs and ensuring that goods can reach New Yorkers faster. We believe efforts like this could possibly create 5,000 industrial jobs. And plus, it will help to reduce some of the harmful environmental impacts of air pollution in communities most disproportionately affected. So, is there one solution for how we deliver an equitable economic recovery? No. But there are certainly key areas and challenges that we should tackle together. As New York City continues to navigate the post-pandemic recovery, it's our time to reimagine our future and create a built-out version of the city we are proud to live and work in. And this is critical to New York City's comeback. We will need to diversify through new technology, support new industries, and train minority and women-owned businesses to seize the opportunity that the city and the industry offers. And as leaders in this field, I challenge you to have these conversations today and to create a more inclusive economic recovery for all. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like now to introduce the moderator for today's panel. Please extend a warm welcome for President and CEO of the American Council of Engineering New York, Johnny Evers. You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now we have to get our panel ready. Very good. Okay, well, first I'd like to say thank you very much, Phil, for the opportunity to address everybody. It's getting a little long in my tenure to say new. I've been here 5 months. But one thing everybody will get used to me over the next however years. If I make 29 like Jay Simpson did, I'll be 82. So I don't know if I'll make 29 years. But big fan of Al Smith. Al Smith never wrote any speeches out. He always wrote it on the back of envelopes. So I'll start with today's moderator introductions with just a warm welcome. We are 100 years, ACEC New York, about 300 engineering firms and affiliated companies. Incidentally, so is the Port Authority and so is the Building Congress, so we're in good company. Al Smith was the reason we have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Just a quick background, and then I'll get right into the meat of our panel. I've been doing construction and transportation lobbying for over 20 years. I was with the Business Council. I did 4 years as a commissioner, the best title ever. I was called commissioner. I was then promoted to be the director of operations for Albany County, though I took the building portfolio with me, so I loved being the public owner. I told the county executive at the time, build things. He said, what? Build things. Spread the payments over 30 years. I'll take care of all the work. You can name them. So I really had an appreciation for engineering and architecture and construction. But we are in exciting times today. Just yesterday, the infrastructure bill was signed, $1.2 trillion. Now comes the fun. Over 5 years, over 7 years, part of the FAST Act, not part of the FAST Act, formula-driven, gateway, congestion pricing, MTA, the Port Authority, the New York State Thruway. We have so many needs. In fact, we had a very, very good discussion on Long Island, and Andy Naris is here from our chapter in Long Island, and Paul Grosser, and we talked about what Long Island needs. Now I have 8 chapters around the state to do the same. So this is a great talk today when it comes to New York City and New York State writ large. It's also exciting because we have a new mayor, we have a new governor, the first year of a federal administration. We have more money than we thought we'd have today from yesterday. So we're going to kick it off with a quick introduction. I'd ask our panel just to say, almost like years ago when we had Admiral Stockdale, who am I and why am I here? So why don't we start with my good friend Greg Kelly.
Good morning, everybody. It kind of feels like Christmas morning. Certainly we had a big gift delivered yesterday, as Johnny was talking about, but here at SDV, I serve as the president and CEO. We're delighted that the bill finally got through. As Johnny and as Elizabeth talked about, there's just such good news out there and such tailwinds behind us in terms of what's available to us. But SDV is a full-service architecture and engineering firm. We operate across transportation infrastructure, buildings and facilities, and construction management, and we're delighted to be here this morning.
Hi, my name is Julia Murphy. I'm a managing principal at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And I've been lucky enough to be able to focus on New York City, some significant large-scale mixed-use projects in New York City and West, Citibank headquarters repositioning, and for Hudson Square. And I'm just thrilled to be able to be here. Thank you for that amazing speech. I think it's a really important time for the city, a real inflection point. It's wonderful to be part of, kind of coming back in. And really happy to discuss all the interesting advancements that are happening.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Velez, and it is like Christmas morning, Greg. It feels like it's 30 degrees outside. So Welcome fall, everyone. I am the president of the Velez organization. We're a second-generation, 50-year-old construction services firm. I also serve proudly as the chairperson of the New York Building Congress. Shameless plug, I hope everyone in this room is going to join us on Thursday for our big centennial ball. New York is so resilient, so strong, and so innovative. And we have the optimism to really bring us out of the effects of this pandemic to something that's even better. And that's what I hope we get to a little bit today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. In fact, I have to go back to get my tux. I'll be there. So.
Good. Dust it off.
The first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill from the perspective of our panel. It is like Christmas morning. It is $1.2 trillion in a variety of forms and fashions that's going to come to our city and our state. The infrastructure bill will have an effect on New York's long-term outlook on a variety of projects. Now, this is a high-level question. I'd just like to go through our panel and say, you know, we've all heard about the planning. We all talk about shovel-ready in engineering. We talk about design-ready. I think it's very obvious we have some big projects. I mention Gateway all the time. I also mention the renovations of our airports and the Port Authority and, of course, MTA. But let's start with our panel. We'll start with Greg. How about a little back of the envelope on what the infrastructure means at first blush?
Well, I think it's great news for New York. One, it helps to have the Senate Majority Leader, part of the home team here. But I think a couple of reflections on the bill. It was alluded to earlier. Authorizations are easy, appropriations are hard. So it's going to take a little bit of time for the money to work through the system to hit New York, and we should use this time wisely in terms of planning and positioning the public sector to deliver programs. It takes capabilities, it takes capacity within the public sector to push projects out the door. They don't just happen. And this is where the private sector and the public sector can come together. We can help our public sector partners look at innovative ways to deliver programs. I mean, one of the delivery methods that we've seen here used successfully in New York, many of us have been part of, are public-private partnerships. Now, they're not an ideal fit for every job, but they do work. And we've moved projects along. Just look at our airports as a very good example of that. When you look at LaGuardia and JFK with the recent announcement with Terminal 1. So there is a lot of activity that needs to happen in preparation for the money to make its way to New York. But it's positive. It's really positive for New York. You know, we all focus on the infrastructure in terms of our subways and our roads and bridges, and there's a lot of money allocated for that. But also, it was alluded to in your conversations, Elizabeth, about freight here in the city. One thing the pandemic has taught us is that things that were underway before the pandemic in terms of changes in buying patterns and changes in supply chain routes, it really accelerated during the pandemic. And that forces us to step back and rethink, and I'm really glad to hear the city's looking at that initiative, where we have to think about how freight moves around the city. And it's not just putting more trucks on the roadways. One of the projects that we hope will go forward is something like the Cross Harbor Freight Tunnel, something that's been talked about for years. EDC was the early proponent of that. And so we have to step back and use this time wisely to think long term, because this bill that got signed into law yesterday is generational. The infrastructure we all use today was conceived, planned, and built by our parents and their parents and their parents. And the work we're doing today is for our children and their children and future generations. So it's really a generational bill. And I think for New York City, as Elizabeth was talking about, we really need to rise to the occasion. I know we will.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously, and you seem like you've actually read some of the text and the legislation, that it's very positive news. I work with a lot of our private developer clients, and so much of their work is based on enabling projects, so major redevelopment, Midtown East, Midtown West, and I think some of those instrumental projects that we've been waiting on, Penn Station area redevelopment, will kind of get some wind in the sails. We also have smaller clients who have, who might be in the nonprofit sector, who have been very uncertain, a number of projects that are, perhaps in early phases of design, a little bit uncertainty about whether they should move forward. So hopefully, as more certainty and, there's more time to actually read through what was passed last night, those things can get moving. And, I think one of the most important sort of potentials of this time and this change is obviously focusing on climate change. Local Law 97 is something that we're still digesting, and it hasn't yet really hit people in the pocketbook. And I know it's been an unpopular sort of regulation in the real estate community. And I think as architects, we think that certainly there need to be carrots and sticks. But there's a lot of potential. There's so much that can be done to our existing building stock, and it's not even super high tech. Although prop tech is a really important piece of that, right? Just sensors, metering, ability of individuals to kind of have much more impact. Instead of these kind of enormous macro systems. So I think that that will play a big role here, and enabling some of that. The increased electrification of buildings is going to be incredibly big, as well as electrification of fleets and cars in the city. So those seem very exciting.
Indeed. Elizabeth.
Okay, so let's look at what infrastructure means, right? I was hoping, I think a lot of us in the room were hoping that the infrastructure bill might include schools and hospitals, and it looks like it doesn't, not right now anyway. So just kind of looking at what it does include, airports are going to be affected in a big way. $295 million for upgrades to JFK, $150 million additional to LaGuardia. That, coupled with the $1.4 billion makeover that Newark Airport is going in, means a lot of work in the airports. I like to look at the numbers and see where it's going, to do that kind of trend analysis for the people in the room to go run and plan their next 2 years on where they're going to be getting their work from. It's focusing on environmental aspects. Our water is going to become less contaminated. Our air quality is going to get better. So it's infrastructure in that way. Transportation, obviously railway, Amtrak, as well as our MTA. So we're looking forward to the Gateway project like we've all been talking about. How about that 2nd Avenue subway extension as well? Really coming in, doing those elevator upgrades for handicap accessibility. So that kind of work at the MTA. You were saying, Julie, the electric vehicle charging stations, the changing over of fleets. So infrastructure, it does not always include our construction trades. So it's changing over the buses to be electrified vehicles. And so it's a phenomenal opportunity to harness the strength of the industry and go after the work that's going to be coming out for the next, 5 or 10 years?
Oh, at least. And I think that segues into an important point. There was some rumbling about it is how much of this really is transportation infrastructure, and people are saying it's 11% or it's not in there, or the green part is something different. That's an excellent point. This is transformative. This is not just roads and bridges, but lead pipes, new energy when it comes to renewables, schools, not just the massive Gateway project, which thank God we're looking at that with Amtrak, and when it comes to freight, as our speaker said, about changing the dynamics of society. And it leads to 5 years of planning. And as Greg said, this is indeed generational. The pressing infrastructure concerns when it comes to public-private partnerships, this is a golden opportunity for these things. But we also talk about the pipeline of work. And we've talked about some of the things that are going to be pressing on us. And a lot of people here are brought here today to see what are the other sides of this. Now, we have a labor shortage. We have issues right now when it comes to supplies and inflation. So while we're planning for the next generation, which are going to be 5 or 10 years out, let's spend a few minutes and talk about what, as an industry, we see as some of the, I wouldn't say impediments, but some of the problems we might face as we start to get from the mayor-elect, from Governor Hochul, from Chuck Schumer, and from all the people that are going to then say this is where the money goes. So why don't we reverse the order, because you started on something that interests me, which is energy part, and tell us a little bit about what you see as the things we've got to overcome when it comes to the bill.
So the New York Building Congress put out their construction outlook, and it tells a pretty sober tale. You know, we're off from our certainly 2019. 2020 dealt us a blow. Our construction industry levels are probably more like 2014. It's going to take some time to get back up. But you're right about the planning time to come in and utilize that infrastructure money that's coming in. Residential spending over the next 3 years is not expected to bounce back to its pre-2020 levels. Government spending has been lower overall, but obviously this infrastructure money coming in is going to be a great shot in the arm. Non-residential spending, commercial, education, recreation, industrial facilities will also continue to struggle to make its gains back. However, the key is going to be those kind of strategic partnerships, those P3 partnerships, to be able to keep us moving forward. I am really heartened by the changes of the administration that we've seen. I'm heartened by the state government. You know, in speaking with Kathy Hochul and looking at her platform, she's always been in the room with our construction industry, the design and construction industry. I think she realizes and appreciates the economic boon to not only our recovery, but for us to continue to, you know, be innovative and grow. And then looking at even on the city, because we all know in this room that so much of what we do here is directly related to legislative actions as well as our elected leaders. And even looking at our next mayor coming in, Eric Adams, his 100-point plan, you run through it, it has our industries in every single part of it, from social equity to public-private partnerships to clean energy. And so for me, it's a great time because it looks like we've got this phenomenal foundation from which we're springing off to rally from this pandemic.
Julia, how about yourself? Any impediments or anything you can see, particularly when it comes to, we've got a plethora of programs, how do we prioritize and taking into account things like construction cost, labor shortages, and even inflation, which not a lot of people have been talking about lately, but that's going to have a factor in when you're planning for 5 or 10 years.
Right. You know, it's certainly a consideration eternally, right? You know, so many of our clients want to build as best as they can, want to do the best thing for the environment as far as sustainability goes, and really it's about, you know, maybe I have Stockholm syndrome, but you know, it's about affording the kinds of things, and you know, and sort of deliberating the value of various elements of design. You know, that's where I sit. You know, I'm not an economist, but a designer. And I say I'm not an economist, but I think, you know, recently I've been learning more and more about CPACE funding, which I think is an interesting development, sort of passed, I believe, in New York along with Local Law 97, which, you know, I think probably everybody in the room knows will be penalties for large buildings and owners for the use of energy above certain limits that have yet to be set or are still emerging. But I think CPACE is an interesting idea, controversial, I know, but finding ways to help building owners, developers afford the kinds of things that are right for the city, for the culture, and for the long haul. Because I think people really do want to do the right thing when it comes to building and taking care of the climate.
Yeah, and I think we'll get to that sometime, hopefully today, when it talks about emerging technologies and emerging codes. Of course, ACEC New York, very big when it comes to codes, good partnerships with New York City on this. But you're talking about another transformative thing that's going to come and will be linked to federal and state and city funding. But general observations about the shortcomings or anything, Greg, when it comes to what we're facing as an industry?
Yeah, two perspectives, Johnny. The first is around priority setting. You've talked about some of the changes that we've had. We've got a new mayor coming. We've got a new governor. And we have to remind ourselves that anytime you have that kind of changeover in leadership, it's like a corporate takeover. You know, new leaders have to put new teams in place, and priorities have to get revisited, and perhaps new priorities established. That happens every cycle. But I always look at that as an opportunity. That's an opportunity for our industry to step up, and Liz talked about the Building Congress, Johnny, you at ACEC. All of us have the opportunity to weigh in and to talk about things that are important, you know, whether it's climate change or freight movement or workforce development. And that's our obligation. We're at that point in our career where we need to make sure that our voice is heard, and heard in a prepared and productive way for the good of New York City. The second area I think that we have to just be mindful of is around that workforce development piece. This bill is not going to, the money's not going to get spent in 5 years, and it maybe gets spent in 10 years. But we're going through that generational change right now. And we have to be preparing that next group of architects, engineers, planners, project managers, construction managers, attorneys, to be prepared to build out for that next generation. And so I think we all have to be mindful of that and be ready to pull that next generation along. And they're going to get tested a bit, just like we were tested earlier in our careers. I think we have to open up those career pathways for them to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and two things that Greg said resonate deeply with ACEC New York and probably with all of you, is the partnerships with government. We talked about public-private partnerships and about how us in the private sector, or we in the private sector, should be able to step forward and say, if you want that, if you want this terminal, if you want this project, we can help you partner with that. But also the long term. It used to be, we talk about apprenticeships and we talk about training, that there would be a constant flow. Nowadays, we have diversion in many of our professionals that say, well, I don't have to do this, I can go here. We want to make sure that we have the construction managers out there, the architects and the engineers out there. So it brings a new perspective on who's going to be the next generation out there when we talk about 5, 10, if not, a lifetime of funding. And it leads to an interesting point. And we heard from Elizabeth when it came to MWBE in diversity. ACEC New York has got a new program, the DEIB Awards, to try to find the best practices in our firms and share those. But this is going to be something where a big program focus will be in the future is the MWBE program, disparity studies, both in New York City and New York State. So why don't we talk a little bit about that aspect of the industry and about construction generally. And why don't I start with, a member firm, and why don't we go from Greg and down the line and talk a little bit about diversity in MWBE and how it impacts our industry.
Well, I think it impacts us in a very significant way. And, I think here in New York, we've had a lot of programs that have been in place for years. We should not be afraid to revisit how the programs are structured and set up. And are they achieving the outcomes that we need and strive for? And so I think this is perhaps a good time to step back, and perhaps it's with some of the changes in administration where we can sit down and say, we're in this together. We're aligned on what the outcomes need to be. We may not be aligned on the hows, so let's figure out if there's a better way to approach the hows. But I also think all of us in our firms are looking to, again, as we have an eye towards that future generation, to making sure that we reflect the society that we're in a firm. And I know Johnny talked about with ACEC as a member firm of ACEC, as a member of the Building Congress, and something we at SDV are keenly aware of and we work on every day.
Julia?
Yeah, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm the board chair of the Beverly Willis Architecture Foundation, which is a foundation that seeks to change the building industry in ways to impact our gender balance. And I think there's no magic bullet, right? There's many toolkits, many ways to sort of come about this. I think, and maybe this is a personal reflection of the events of the past 2 years, that there is personal change that has to occur for each and every one of us in terms of challenging ourselves to think outside of our own experiences, our own backgrounds. I think, it's been, personally, it's been enlightening to think about the sort of, the experiences and the cultural capital that maybe we're bringing into the room, into the conference room, into the workplace, and try to really do that with somebody who shares a totally different background. I mean, it's a real sort of bending of our habits, right? It's always easy to meet somebody, as we mentor, right? Meet somebody who reminds you a little bit of you somehow, so you kind of bring them along, a shared school, a shared background, a shared experience, and those sort of human traits and habits are inbred, they're deeply embedded, that we look for similarities. And it's an exercise to challenge ourselves to think about someone who has a completely different experience. Maybe none of those things are true, but there are some kinds of, human commonalities. And, it's uncomfortable. We have to make ourselves, and I'm speaking as, from a position of privilege, of course, but, I need to be uncomfortable. I need to work to bring people who are not from the exact same background as me to the table and listen more.
I think it's that kind of passion that helps transform it. I really do. Elizabeth.
So the pandemic certainly dealt a health blow to our communities, but it really dealt a wealth blow as well, and especially to our marginalized, less fortunate communities. And MWBE firms are those firms that really hire from our community, so when the waters rise, you're going to see that with MWBE businesses being included. But a little bit deeper, we're heralding the signing of the infrastructure bill. In January, President Biden signed the Justice 40 initiative. And that Justice 40, I'm just going to look down to read it, says, deliver 40% of the overall benefits of relevant federal investments to disadvantaged communities. It's the first time in that, to my recollection, and I've been a diversity and inclusion advocate for all my life. My father's company, this company, wouldn't have gotten where it is today without good opportunity programs like the SBA, and then some of the programs that we have right now with New York State and New York City. So it's a tremendous opportunity right now to strengthen the programs that are there. We've got the federal push behind it with the Justice 40 initiative. We've got a mayor coming in that has made MWBE procurement a priority, and all indications are from Governor Hochul that she's looking to take what the state has done, 30% goals, and actually strengthen those as well. And so we're looking forward to working with our industry, working with the folks that are making the decisions on how we can strengthen and improve access to opportunities with regard to MWBE.
Yeah, I agree, and I think some of the things that were said about this, and first of all was reflect society, but also things like mentor-protege and industry help. And I think not just with MWBE, but also with partnerships for general building is always look for that connection, that dichotomy of public-private partnership. I know that ACEC in my previous life at the Business Council was always try to provide the information to those that are making the policy. Policymakers can weigh that, and they can discuss it with whomever, but ultimately, in the end, you hope when you have buy-in and you have the expertise brought to policymakers, it'll flow into meaningful and successful programs that are carried out by the public sector. But getting back a little bit to the infrastructure, we've kind of talked about the variety of things when it comes to what projects will be there, but the time frame on this. The time frame is interesting, and so many things we've talked about have been transformative. I mean, we're sitting at the cusp of new administrations in Albany and New York City, and really in DC, but we're talking about how this flows outwards in a new 5-year plan, in the new plan when it comes to congestion pricing and gateway and the like. But there's going to be different things out there that are going to be different when it comes to technology and planning. Each generation will move further. Let's talk a little bit from the industry perspective in construction and engineering. when it comes to technologies. What's going to change with this new 5-year plan or this new infrastructure bill? And engineering, as you know, is a lot of numbers. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a PhD in government, but I know Greg is a PE. So why don't we start with our resident engineer?
You know, there's an expression I heard years ago that, you know, construction has not been the hotbed of innovation. Heck, we're still using the same formula for concrete that the Romans invented. Now, that's not entirely true, but it was, you know, perhaps the early part of our careers, you know, technology was not as, obviously, as prevalent as it is today. It's all around us, you know, and we're all benefiting from it, and we're all trying to figure out how to leverage it in our business. I won't speak to how construction gets executed from a technology standpoint, but more maybe perhaps how the design gets executed. I mean, you know, the tools that we have available to us today to look at a project in 3, 4, 5D dimensions is phenomenal. And all of us are looking at ways to have a digital transformation around how we think about projects, how projects get planned, and how they might get built, in terms of sequence and the phasing. So it's something that engineering firms and architecture firms are working on a daily basis. But there's also a technology piece to what's going to get built. I mean, Elizabeth talked about electric charging stations. And you think about the ripple effect of that across all the types of infrastructure that are out there, whether it's mobility infrastructure or social infrastructure. That's going to fundamentally change how we think about infrastructure and who we partner with. You know, traditionally, Johnny, I'll think of the Department of Transportation, whether it's in the city or at state DOT, they wouldn't typically interface with a utility in terms of energy. And there's now going to be that interface between the mobility infrastructure and the energy infrastructure. And these are two groups that probably haven't spent a whole lot of time talking to each other. So when you think about like new relationships and new partnerships that have to occur around, because what we're seeing is the technology in the infrastructure output now requires us to think differently in terms of how the planning of those projects gets done. So I think there's both the introduction of technology into how we do the work, but then the introduction also is who we're partnering with to deliver on the work.
Fantastic, and I couldn't agree more, and that's the whole thing we talked about, transformative, not just with technology, but with what we build. So how about your take on it, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of come through a decade of tremendous innovation in terms of digitalization of how we design and how we build, and you know that will certainly continue. But I think, you know, so much of the technology revolutions that we see are when they stick, it's about solving a problem, solving for a specific problem. And you know, I think things like prefab, right? It's like, you know, we make runs at prefab, and you know, we get a little further and then we kind of back off, or you know, think, okay, it's just for bathrooms, or you know, just for little core components. And I think, you know, I think that new constraints around materials, around decarbonization are going to make the problem that we need to solve, are going to make some of these things have more sticking power and be potentially more lasting and kind of get a little bit more traction. I think similarly, you know, sort of digital twin is, you know, what we talk about in the industry, right? You know, we model the building, you know, the architect's just the little, you know, sort of naive start of the full model of a building as it goes into construction, and then, you know, into really kind of leveraging that from an operations standpoint as ways, you know, back to the idea of prop tech, right? It's not like that deeply mysterious, you know, but it's about understanding, you know, if the shades need to come down to, you know, save a couple of tons of heating load and, you know, and carbon on the other side. So, you know, I think that the problems that we need to solve are going to be more specific and more pressing, that are going to sort of jettison us into thinking a little bit more, and those are sort of the two pieces that I see most sort of poignantly in terms prefab, and then also the model and what we can do with that digital twin in the world.
Excellent, excellent. And lastly, this will be interesting because of building. How about the building perspective on this?
I love it. So we have seen an acceleration of technology even within the last, 19, 20 months. Not necessarily the high tech, but kind of the low tech. That's made our job sites safer, and it's allowed us to continue on. And so by low tech, I mean connectivity, right? Those Zoom meetings that we're all so Zoom fatigued about. We were able to, in short order, be able to keep connecting with our industry, with our clients, and continue on in our work. By the way, Joe Aliotta has the best virtual backgrounds on his Zoom. If you honestly think about how we were able to really turn in a blink of an eye, really, in March, right, when lights went out and we had to shut down. We all thought it was going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks at first. But we were able to change the way that we did business. In the field, we were able to change the way we did business rapidly as well, because of the safety of our workers in the field as well as the productivity. And we've actually seen safer workplaces and higher productivity, even given the constraints of working in this COVID environment. Some of the more high-tech things that I'm looking forward to are, the use of drones, obviously, but the wearables that are going to sense the environment that's around us, as well as virtual reality, using virtual reality in the construction. We have accelerated in, somebody said to me the other day, we've accelerated by a decade our usage of practical technology in the construction industry because we had to. That shows us how innovative we are as an industry.
I think that it goes back to the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And we've seen that. When we shut down as a society and it all went virtual into Zoom, things still had to be built.
That's right.
We had to lobby hard to make sure we were seen as essential workers. They had to be designed. And it kind of flows through with the whole idea of technology and advancement. Is not only did we spend that time trying to reinvent ourselves, but to continue forward, but we had to address things like charging stations because we're going green. How does that merge with existing government agencies and the private sector? How do we envelop things like drones and getting rid of old-time paper CAD boards and everything like that to go to something you can use on the job site? So it is exciting because it perpetuates itself and then finds form in what we actually design and build. Now, Phil, it's probably off script. I want to be cognizant of time. How long do we have?
We definitely have at least another 5-10 minutes.
Awesome. Let's go with one more question because we're all here to talk about infrastructure and everything. And it's kind of I'd say non-scripted, but I'm not going to make anybody nervous. This is a tremendous time for projects. We talk about, could we do more paving? Could we do more bridge repairs? And incidentally, I had memorized for so long what the White House said New York would get. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, but I know it's north of somewhere about 10 or 12 billion for road and bridge alone. So we have opportunities there when it comes to the real meat and potatoes of it. But we also talk, this is New York City. What would be, if we had a wish list, what would our panel desire to see started right away and dig into with our government partners? And this could be anything, and this could be something generic. But Greg, how about yourself?
So you're asking for a specific project or projects?
Or a theory.
Or a theory.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have to think both operational and near term, the projects that are ready to be built. And
Right.
this is not the shovel-ready category, but these are projects that have been in planning in the pipeline for a long time, and they're still considered essential. We talked about the Gateway project. Liz talked about the 2nd Avenue subway. I mentioned the Cross Harbor Freight Tunnel. These are generational projects, and we should make sure that with the resources that are coming available with the federal support, that we keep those moving forward. But we also have to think longer term. We have to think about, as Julie was talking about, the technology piece of this. And so I would hope that, thinking about harnessing technology to make New York that leading city, that model city that it's always been in our history from a technology standpoint, whether it's the charging stations, whether it's climate change, but putting us on the leading edge. And Elizabeth, you talked a lot about that with your priorities. Taking advantage of some of those longer-term priorities for the city with these resources, I think, would be very helpful.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better. I talk about massive projects that are going to define this great city with the technology to move us forward on new designs. Julia, yourself?
Well, Christmas came early and I got my bike lane on the Brooklyn Bridge, so I have to really try to expand my mind. But I do think stormwater is a big and pressing issue, and hopefully we'll stem the tide of climate change and we won't have the kinds of storms of increasing intensity. But you know, finding a way to better manage, detain, treat our stormwater in a diverse way throughout the city, and you know, and not have combined sewer system into the Hudson River, I think would be an amazing step forward for New York City. We pioneered sewage, you know, once before, and we can do it again.
And transformative as well. There's an example of technology and the idea of young kids today wanting to save the world and hearing green, renewables, environmental. We're hoping that translates into the next generation of environmental engineers. So there's a twofer. Elizabeth.
I'd like to look at those projects, if I had my druthers, that have impact on the day-to-day lives of New Yorkers, to maintain New York as the world-class city that we are, the global leader that we are. Roadways. Man, I cannot stand the Bruckner Expressway now. I think they're on a 100-year plan. Sidewalks, pedestrian walkways, wheelchair access to our subways. To improve the everyday living of New Yorkers, I would love some of that infrastructure money to be earmarked. And Elizabeth, I love your ferry, talking about ferries. I am such a fan of using the waterways of New York City. I mean, that's why we were created. That's why New York City was the center of the world back hundreds of years ago when the Dutch came here to settle. It was our waterways that made this such a valuable piece of real estate in this area. And so I would love to see the ferry terminals improved to access waterway access from the outer boroughs into Manhattan and outside.
Excellent.
Liz, I just want to jump in on that because I think you make a really good point. You know, we talk about the macro scale, the things we do in New York, but New York is made up at a micro scale.
Yeah.
There's communities, there's housing, and we can't let that get lost in the tide of the big projects.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Go ahead, Julie.
jump in, you know, that NYCHA has done tremendous work inventorying. They know what they need to do, you know, and it's NYCHA housing is the size of, you know, I think it's the population of Detroit. It's a city unto itself, and it's a, you know, I think a deeply valuable part of our city, you know, where people can really afford to live. And they're pretty much ready to go. So I'm hoping they'll get some of that.
And you know, the beauty of this is there are no wrong answers when it comes to this. There really aren't. This is an exciting time. And as always, we would welcome partnering with the administration, both here and in Albany and in DC. We have a room full of experts that want to design, construct, and build these projects. And they go a variety of ways, whether it's environmental, whether it's into housing, whether it's into large capital projects. But Phil, do we have time? Are we going to do a Q&A? Is there anybody that has a question for myself or the panel or any observations? Sir.
So first an observation, then a short question. So it seems to me that the leaders of our government, state and local, have to be willing to stand up to the various outside interests. For example, 18 miles east of Atlantic City is the perfect space for a wind farm that will power 100,000 homes in New Jersey. And yet it hasn't happened. I'm sure that there's places.
We have a mic. I was going to repeat the question, but go ahead with the mic.
I'm sure there's areas off of, thank you. I'm sure there's areas off of Long Island that have similar. So it seems to me that our leaders have to be willing to stand up to the money, whatever that means, you know, the people, the groups that are against this, just because it's in the public interest. So now the question. So as everybody knows, JP Morgan Chase is taking down 270 Park Avenue because it was once an A building, and that corridor of Lex, Madison Park, Fifth Avenue, and in the center of Midtown, they're no longer A buildings. What do you guys see as far as the real estate owners doing in terms of maybe core rehabs, but unfortunately they're still left with the columns and the low ceilings in their buildings? Do you see more and more perhaps taking down buildings, tall buildings, and perhaps Congress coming up with some tax incentives like they did during the Reagan administration, where Congress halved the depreciation from 30 years to 15 years and then put it back?
Okay. I'd repeat the question, but it's a little real estate and a little economics in there. But if I might, part of it was the observation is a question, and then the second part is what policy is. I think that as industry leaders, we have a responsibility to tell those in elected office what our story is, and then it's, democracy. It becomes, what is the pros and cons, and ultimately we hope the best public good comes out. And it's a constant process, and we saw that with the infrastructure bill itself. That being said, when it comes to public policy, say for municipal building code, writ large, when it comes to federal priorities for repurposing, I think that's your question. And the impact there would be, the special interest would be, does it help the neighborhood, the society in New York, the real estate industry, et cetera? And climate. And there's that ever-present environmental concern. My short back of the answer is, I'm sure that's going to be something prospectively for years to come. Cities changing. I once made the mistake of saying to somebody, I'm a proud New Yorker, and they said, where are you from? I said, Albany. I said, nah, different area. I said, New York State. But it does become parochial when it comes to New York City, Washington, Chicago, Atlanta. So the answer is, this is a national issue with local impact. And how does that get changed? So let me put it to our panel.
May I?
Go ahead.
All you have to do is look outside. Look at One Vanderbilt. Look what happened there. That was a series of buildings that were revenue generating. They were in the black. There was no reason per se to tear it down and build that beautiful building that's there. But there was vision and leadership that allowed them to take down that area and really transform our skyline yet again. And so I think we're going to be seeing more of that with owners of real estate and their parcels realizing that there is energy efficiency, to be competitive, to again be this kind of visionary changing of our landscape. We're going to see it soon, I think, with the former Grand Hyatt. So we'll just look outside again and see that when you call buildings that are coming up for residential. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of not necessarily adaptive reuse of buildings, but adaptive reuse of sites.
Very good. Julia.
Yeah, 270 Park is, it's a sore point for us. So, not really. I mean, we, I think in any other city, actually did a study of 270 Park before it came down about how that building could have been retrofitted to increase floor-to-floor height, add elevators, and of course, we love New York, we love new buildings, so don't get me wrong in that case, but certainly the most sustainable building is the one you don't build or the one that's already built. And there's tremendous technology that can allow us to reuse concrete frame completely, completely reclad, all new mechanical systems. That embodied carbon is already going to be so significantly less than a brand new building. And I'm not an economist. I'm not an accountant. I like what you're saying about depreciation. But I think our hope is that there's so much that can be done. That's smart, that's understanding of the market, right? The city needs to be renewed. We need to create these new centers. We need to change with the times, but hopefully we can do it in a smart way, through changing the building facade, through, there's so much that can be done to the mechanics of a building to increase its level of performance.
Very good. And with expert input. I always want to put that in there to make sure when you mention it's often who might speak the loudest or longest. Expert input. Greg.
I want to conflate your two issues. The first one was about do people have the courage to stand up for the things that are right around renewables? But I think it also ties to what you heard from Julia and Liz, that we should all be advocating for good public policy. Our voice matters. Let's not turn that over to somebody who's less knowledgeable. We're all experienced. We all have a track record of building things. The group in this room can point around the city, and we've got a good CV in terms of getting things done. Let's not be afraid to have our voice be heard, either through the industry associations or individually, to advocate for what's right. And if it's right to do renewables, if it's right to bring down a building and build something more sustainable there, we should do that and advocate for it.
Dean. Good morning.
Johnny, you mentioned transformative, the word transformative several times. Greg, you referred to or alluded to capacity, and obviously there was this overarching MWBE, diversity, inclusion element to the entire discussion. Do you feel comfortable, or are we at a point in partnering from an educational perspective when you speak to the capacity? We have ACE Mentor, we have Salvadori, those types of programs. But with this transformation with technology, do we feel comfortable enough knowing that the students that are coming out across a wide range of demographics, are they coming out, are they prepared? Are they going into government, or are government, managers, middle-level managers, are they prepared, for example, for design build, for P3s? Have we gotten to that point? Do we need to be doing a lot more to create the environment and the structure? And then how do we prevent all those folks, the young people that get that technical background from going to private equity, going into finance as opposed to going into the AEC community? And, that brain drain, they see the money that's being made on the financial side, but how do you draw them and attract them and prepare them to go
Excellent,
into the AEC?
excellent question, and that is a concern we have, not just with engineering and architecture, but in construction and any part of this whole design process where you say, I think that I've heard that the college majors that are the toughest, it's like pharmacy, pure mathematics, and engineering. And if you have somebody that's a newly minted engineer, somebody from private sector outside of our industry might say, we could really use your smarts with algorithms. How'd you like to come here? Well, we don't want to lose that. So the short answer in this is ever vigilance to try to make sure that we replace those that are in our firms that retire. And I think the same is true in government, that we want to have good partners where you have a PE here and a PE there, and they talk the same language and they can go back and forth. So I'm worried about it. ACEC is worried about it. All of us are. And it's going to be something we're going to focus on a lot more in the future with retirements. But I'd love to hear from people that are actually in the trenches on this one.
I'll go first. Dean, your question is so layered with the levers we need to pay attention to make sure that the workforce is there to plan and to build. And Johnny, you said it well. It's something that all of us are thinking about on a regular basis. We have 5 generations in the workforce today. Now it's rapidly, every day that changes, right? Those ratios change. But, and you mentioned some good programs to draw people in, whether it's Salvadori or ACE Mentor program, all excellent programs. But I think we need to do more. I think we, the practitioners in the field, we have to think about making this interesting. And it kind of goes back to the technology question. I think there's to be an element to draw the next generation into our business is going to be dependent on how rapidly we adopt technology and how we do the work. So I think we have to keep an eye on that. But we also have to recognize that there's a new generation there. We have to create the time and space for them to learn. And in many cases, we're going to have to accelerate that, and perhaps this infrastructure bill, Johnny, will force that. I mean, it's just we're going to be in a position where we've got to deliver. We're going to have commitments to deliver programs and projects, and we're going to have to take a chance on individuals. So there's so much we can pay attention to in that respect, Dean, but I think as an industry, I think if we keep it top of mind, saying, we want to create the workforce of the future, we want to make sure it's diverse and inclusive and technology savvy, and have a vision of what we want our industry to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. And if we have that top of mind every day and how we make decisions, I think that's going to be really helpful, and that's how we'll build that capacity.
Julia, you have a good perspective on this too with the scholarship program that you're in charge of.
Right. I mean, I guess my other thought is that I think there's a market for meaning, for meaningful work. And we may not, and maybe we can, right? We may not be able to compete with the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, but I think that there is a consciousness in the next generations. You know, they're not quiet, and they're not going to take it. And I think that that's something that we can offer them by engaging in meaningful projects that impact our society and our cities.
I love that you brought up ACE, mentor. And unfortunately, a lot of our internship programs were dealt a blow, right, in 2020 and even into 2021 as we lost almost a 2-year cycle of bringing interns in and exposing them to our wonderful world. You know, we talk about generations and this new generation, and I have a 24-year-old son, and he is hell-bent on being a change agent, right? It's what he wants to be. He wants to do a job that has meaning. And this is our story, and we need to tell it, right? I don't think that there is a more impactful, and biased, I don't think that there's a more impactful industry than ours, design and construction. It's tangible. We change the world that's around us. And I know that I try to excite and enthuse the young people that are coming into our doors, because they want that. They really want that. They really want to be a part of change. And on the other side, it's economics, right? My father got his start in construction industry in the 1960s purely for economics. Had a growing family. Full disclosure, I have 6 sisters. 6 sisters. And he had to have a career that he could feed his family. Construction is a phenomenal career. So I'm talking on the workforce issues. We need to go out and ensure that we can open up those doors and provide gateways to get into our trades.
I want to jump on Liz's comment. We have to be better storytellers about what we do.
Yeah.
Liz, I've got 5 children, and I was out one morning for a run with one of them, and he happens to be in banking. Smart guy, really intelligent young man. And he looked at me, he says, "I'm jealous." I said, "Of what?" He says, "At least you can see what you do." And I thought, well, yeah, that's right. We impact everything around us. The road we're running on, the sewers that we're using. I said, well, you help people create wealth. And that fuels the economy too. I was trying to find a rebound to make him not feel bad about his career. But the point is, we have a really good story to tell. We should be talking about why we do it, not what we do. We should talk about why we're cutting down people's commute time to get to jobs, to get to health care, to get to schools, to get to family. As we return to more normal pre-pandemic levels, we should talk about the great housing that we built that gives people a decent middle-class existence. And if we talk about that, that will inspire generations, Dean, to come into the workforce and what we do.
Absolutely. I think that we're merging the two. We don't tell our stories enough. I say this to ACEC, it's a captive audience and kind of captive here. Everything around you, designed and built by people in this room, and we need to tell that story to excite them on this is what you can do. And it goes to that burning desire of kids want to save the world. They want to put up windmill farms. They want to put up solar panels. They want to get rid of lead pipe. This is a phenomenal time for this, to leverage that and tell our stories and bring in that next generation. I think, do we have one more, Phil, or one more? I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Lisa Bing, and I'm an outsider to this industry, but I'm a strategy and leadership expert, and I have more of a comment than a question. I have more of a comment than a question on this topic of talent. And I'd like to suggest that innovation be applied to how you think about talent and also leadership. Innovation is applied to your technology and how you build and how you approach and so forth. And we need to rethink how we, A, recognize talent, and we also need to give more attention to our leaders and managers, because they are the keepers of the talent. People leave managers, not companies. So I just wanted to add that, offer that up.
Thank you.
And I think that that's a great closing. We've talked about the next generation. This is indeed a transformative time with trillions of dollars, with great projects, particularly here in the Empire State and in New York City. And we've talked about what we need and what you need when it comes to an industry and our government partnerships, and about the innovation that'll lead to the next generation of architects, engineers, construction, and real estate, and a variety of other channels when it comes to transforming the society and making sure that we're very successful. Phil, I want to thank you for the opportunity and thank our panel. Do we have some closing words from you, our host?
Well, that definitely was a great discussion. I thank you all. You know, one of the things that I think we covered a lot of different topics, you know, even going into talent and retention, attraction, and making it exciting. One of the things we didn't talk about, just for my 2 cents, is with all these transformative projects, and you talk about, you know, all the ones we spoke here, they're mega projects. I know our clients have been concerned. They've had in general good years, but they've seen their backlog shrinking, you know, and not to any dangerous levels, but they've seen it reduce over the last year. These transformative projects, besides getting work for a lot of companies, I think is also going to reduce the number of bidders on a number of projects. I think everyone in this room has seen the number of bidders in the competition grow significantly for projects. You've seen smaller companies try to bid on bigger projects and vice versa. I think the benefit we're going to get from this as well, and hopefully the shovel-ready projects get into construction and get into being awarded, you know, quicker than they have been in the past. But it's going to let the pressure off. It's going to let people and companies bid their normal prices, so that they're not looking to just win some work to keep going. So I think that's another major benefit from all of this. So it does really feel like Christmas today. So on behalf of Anchin, I would like to thank all of you for joining us here today. It's great to see so many people in person, and I also want to thank our virtual attendees as well. We hope to see you in person in the near future as well. Thank you for supporting our event, whether you're here or whether you're virtual, and definitely be on the lookout for our future events. As many of you are aware, we did send out an industry survey last month that accompanied some of the invitations for the event. I want to thank those who participated. We really appreciate your time that you spent to provide your feedback. We are wrapping up the survey tomorrow, so anybody who has not participated, please take a look at the invites and see if you can participate. And if you don't have them, please email events@anchin.com. We'll send you the link, and then you can share your information. We are going to publish the survey results in the next few weeks, so please, the more we have, the more meaningful it's going to be. I want to thank our panel again. I want to thank our keynote, Elizabeth. Yes. Thank you very much. And our panelists, Greg, Julia, and Liz, and also Johnny for being a great moderator as well. You know, your insights and your perspective are definitely valuable, and I know I definitely learned something today.